Saddle hunters, our brothers over at Tethered continue to kill the game by releasing innovative products. They just recently put out the Eberhard series saddle. They also put out the Menace saddle, which is for our husky brothers and sisters that are into saddle hunting. That saddle will do just maybe a little bit better job of cupping your quote unquote assets. But the thing that I'm most excited about is their recent release of the Tethered One climbing stick. This thing is crazy light, crazy strong, and crazy quiet. I'm just going to cut to the chase here and give you some specs. Each stick weighs in at less than 1 pound. That includes your Dynalite rope attachment. A 3-pack of these will weigh in at 2.7 pounds, which is ridiculously light. It's a 17-inch step-to-step single stick height, and there's an 8.5-inch step footbed, which gives you plenty of room for those of us folks with bigger feet. It's all made with aerospace grade titanium and aluminum for construction. So if you'd like to learn more about Tether's innovative products, head over to tetherednation.com and check them out. The first thing I do in the morning before a hunt, before a scout, or just before getting ready for work is have my morning coffee, and I'm sure most of you out there listening are the same. Make sure you're filling your mug with Brew Coffee, as it is the only coffee company that is both 2% for conservation certified and donates 10% of its profits to conservation organizations to help secure the future of our wild places. So head to skullbrewcoffee.com and choose between 3 killer roasts of coffee and know that you are supporting conservation with every sip. Welcome to the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast, brought to you by Skull Brew Coffee Company. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you are listening to episode number 197. Today I'm joined by my good buddy, Brian Broderick from Day 6 Gear, and we're talking all about hunting pressured whitetails and getting in the comfort zone. So stay tuned. All right. What is up, everyone? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you are doing well. Hope you are feeling fine. If you are open, I hope that you are getting some well-needed timber time to chase some whitetails with a bow. I had a chance to get out this past weekend. I've been open for a little over a week. Headed into the second week. This will be the second week that my little area of Pennsylvania has been open, and hunted pretty much all day Saturday. Did a morning hunt. I know that typically, October mornings sometimes may or may not be fruitful. And I'm kind of really pressuring this one particular area where I know, or I thought that there was a really good deer that I'd bumped after I'd found him glassing, found where he was bedded, and checked the camera and hunted that particular spot. And there is a decent deer in there that I have on camera. But the one that I'm really kind of after that I saw glassing and that I found bedded there, it seems as though he's already kind of transitioned off. There's 2 cameras on this particular piece and different sections of the property, and I assumed I'd pick him up on one of the 2 if he was still in the area, and he's not come through. So, which is why I kind of been pressuring that particular area kind of hard. That's where I've been doing the majority of my hunting this past week, whether it was a morning or whether it was an evening. Considering that he was probably going to transition at some point and I was going to lose him. So I was trying to make hay while the sun was shining, so to speak. But the good news is there's still a good deer in there, so I'll probably back out of there and give it a little bit of a rest. There's a couple other places. This time of year, I'm really kind of, I have a ton of places that I've hung cameras across a bunch of different public pieces this year. And so really the beginning part of my season here is I kind of had a plan for early, which, I tried to execute, and that deer just wasn't there. And so then, what it kind of starts to become is kind of hunting specific places, always with the right wind, but using those opportunities then to kind of check the cameras that are in those areas to kind of understand what was going on. Now, I've talked in the past that I like to hunt historical, camera data for a large part, or by and large. And there's 1 or 2 pieces that I'm doing that this year that I have a little bit of information from running cameras on them for the past couple years. And so I'm kind of waiting until I, from what my cameras have told me in the past, that the timing is right for those particular pieces. But there's a bunch this year that are brand new to me. And so I'm kind of having to hit those and hunt those, of course, when the wind is right, go in and check trail cameras and see what's going on, if there's, deer in the area, and then confirm. Some of this stuff is even just learning how they're moving on some of these pieces. And I think Brian and I talk a little bit about that in this podcast, because I had done I think it was right before we recorded this, I had done an evening hunt from the ground, slipped in after work, just really quick in a general area where I had seen that big deer and had jumped him. Um, and ended up having a couple deer come in to about 20 yards, just couldn't get a shot. Doe's going to try to fill the freezer. But what I had learned was they're using this particular kind of bedding area and how they're moving was different than what I had thought. And so, that was a learning experience for me. It was also finding better access into this particular piece, which I was able to do. And so now I think I can hunt this particular area of this piece a little bit more effectively because I think my access is a little bit better. And I'm starting to better understand how they're kind of moving. The one thing that's been instrumental for me in a couple of these pieces to understand how they're moving is running my cameras on video mode. That's one of the things that I try to do as much as I can. If it's in an area that I'm not going to get a ton of pictures, and I'm not worried about blowing out my batteries or filling up the card, I'll run it on video mode. Particularly if there's a primary scrape or some type of sign that they're going to be hitting, because I want to see what direction they're coming from and at what times. Sometimes you'll have a deer that's facing the camera, but maybe the camera didn't trigger quickly enough, and they had turned toward it whenever they were really actually walking the opposite way. So I want to see how they're coming and how they're going. I want to see what way their heads are pointing whenever they're coming to the camera, and I want to see their asses, at some point in what direction they're walking away from the camera. That helps me kind of understand, especially on these new pieces, how they're going to use some of this terrain and how they're going to kind of move through some of these bedding areas and stuff like that. So that's what I was able to pick up this past week because I pulled another camera on a hunt on Saturday. And it was a place that I hunted last year, later in the year, and got a little bit of intel about, and I had assumed on this particular parcel, there was going to be some pressure in certain areas, and I figured it would push deer into a particular spot. And I just wasn't 100% sure on how they were moving and how they were using the terrain. I could find a few trails here and there, but they weren't really, really descript. And so I had that camera on video mode and got some really good intel in terms of how they're getting through this particular area. So that was helpful, and it'll help me kind of put together some hunts as we get further and further into the season. But with that, I'm not going to delay here a whole lot. Going to kind of get jumped into the podcast. One thing to mention really quickly is Skull Brew Coffee Company is running a promotion for the opener. All you have to do is go to skullbrewcoffee.com and use the promo code OPENER20, and it will save you some cash on some killer coffee. If you don't know much about Skull Brew Coffee Company, it's a business that my wife and I own, and we donate 10% of our profits back to nonprofit conservation organizations. It's just a way for us to give back. So if you're interested in looking for some killer single origin craft roasted coffee, then check out skullbrewcoffee.com and go ahead and use that promotional code. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get jumped into today's podcast. Brian from Day 6 is one of my favorite people to have on. He's just a good dude, full of great information. And one of the things I appreciate most about him is he's just a straight shooter. And a lot of what we talk about today is, hunting pressured whitetails, a little bit about, flooding, because he lives in the South. He's down there in Alabama, and folks down there have, a lot of flooding issues right now, of course. And so I was just curious as to how deer react whenever they hit these, really nasty kind of weather episodes, and what they do, like when they're displaced and stuff like that. And then the cool thing is at the very end, and this actually really helped me, was he has a specific way he likes to set up his bow for whitetails. And when I say set up, I'm not talking necessarily tuning and broadheads and stuff like that. I mean, that's kind of, the basis, you need to have a tuned bow. But what he really talks about is removing moving parts and simplifying your setup, so you start to remove the thinking process from taking your shot when the moment of truth comes. And it's actually helped me recently because I'd kind of been doing this to a degree, but didn't really have a method for how I was doing it. And the way he broke it down clearly gave me a method for how to do it. And so I actually went and kind of dialed in my bow right after this podcast, and it's making a difference in my world. And it'll probably, potentially make a difference for you guys too. So be sure to listen through. That's probably toward like the 3/4 of the way mark of the podcast. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump into the podcast. As always, I want to thank you all for listening. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And I have my buddy on. You will recognize the dulcet tones coming from this gentleman. This is, I think, the 4th podcast we've done together over the past. I know we've known each other for about 2 years. I'm talking to my buddy, Mr. Brian Broderick of Day 6 Specialized Gear. What's going on, Brian?
What's happening?
Oh, just got out of the woods, man. I ran out of the house today, working from home still, of course. So I ran out of the house as soon as I possibly could and ran to the timber and did a quick hunt from the ground. It's since the last time you and I talked, we talked a little bit about ground hunting and stuff like that, and I've had two hunts this
Mm-hmm.
year so far, and both of them have been from the ground. And today I was at had a couple deer come in to 25 yards, and that was which was
Well,
which
that's
was
good.
cool. Yeah, yeah, I was stoked, man. I was truth be told, we can get into this when we start talking some whitetails, more specifically what you have going on and stuff. But there's an area where I
Yeah,
kind of found this, a pretty decent deer, really by any state standards, and I found where he was bedded and stuff like that, and I kind of have a sense of where he's living. But this whole piece is brand new to me, public, and so I'm really trying to figure out what my best way to get in to try to hunt him. And so I went opening morning and had a decent sit, hunted from the ground because the canopy's so low in there, you can't really get into a tree. You're going to really have limited shooting. Um, and then
sure.
today was really, I jumped out of work and, because I'm losing light, and I think I got to like the spot that I wanted to hunt just a little after 5. And, you're pretty much tapped out if you have canopy, probably like around 7. So I had like maybe 2 hours. And I was really trying to find
Yeah,
a better access route. Is really what I was trying to find, because my access was good but way too long, from the previous spot. I knew there had to be a better way, and so that was my mission today. Forgot my boots, so I ended up having to wear my Vans slip-ons to hunt, because that's what I wore in the truck to go hunt. And so I wore basically
oh
skateboarding.
boy.
Yeah, I wore skateboarding shoes to walk through a swamp, and which it worked out. It worked out fine. But I had a couple of deer come into 25 yards. I was going to try to kill a doe tonight if I had the chance, and then the fawn ended up picking me off because they ended up coming from an area that I didn't expect them to come from. But you live and you learn, man. The ground setup is just something I'm trying to get used to, and it's just different, man. Like, it's different than picking out a tree. It's like I'm having to look for significant back cover. I'm trying to look where the shadows are at and just all those types of things and find the right setup. But I'll get there.
Whew, man, that sounds awful complicated to me. Other than you being in your Portland moccasins walking through the swamp, that's pretty funny.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
My Portland moccasins. That's
yeah.
great, man. They came without riots though. They came without riots. So
Oh,
yeah,
oh, I got you.
yeah,
I got you. Yeah, so those cost twice as much.
yeah.
But
Exactly.
I'll tell you, man, the last hour and a half, 2 hours of the day, that's been that little last ditch and dive, ditch work and dive into a tree deal. That's been my bread and butter,
Hmm.
since I could drive,
Right.
uh, 30 something years ago, longer than I care to remember. But uh, you know, growing up in construction, man, I was getting off work at 3:30,
Right.
and depending on whose job I was on, sometimes it was a little earlier if I could make a deal. But hell, man, I mean, I would ditch and be an hour from somewhere I hunted. And at 4:30, I'm walking in. 5 o'clock, I'm in a stand, and at 6:30 or 7, you're to loosen an arrow. I mean,
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
And especially hunting pressured deer, yeah, hell, man, they're not going to move before right before dark anyway.
That's just it, man. Because I've spent a lot of time like giving up on evening hunts, during and not holistically, but just when I'm during the week when I'm working, because I was always like, man, if I get out, I'm only gonna have like maybe by the time I got to where I was setting up, I had maybe an hour and a half to hunt, and a lot of times in the past, it's like I probably wouldn't went out and have done it just because I'm like, oh, it's only going to be an hour and a half. But like you said, man, it's like sometimes I think I'm more willing to do it whenever I feel like I know I have a deer in the area, and it's just and it's more of like a cat and mouse game. It's going to be, am I there when he's going to be there type of thing. You know what I mean? Where it's like I just need to like have good access, and I just need to be there. I just need to kind of continue to tighten the noose on him, so to speak, because I know he's in the area. I just need to
Yep.
figure out what my best access is, and I need to figure out, can I get a visual of him somewhere. And aside from that, even like I learned a couple things tonight. One was access, and two was the deer were moving out of bedding way different than I thought they were. At least those couple deer.
Yeah.
And then I ended up running into a couple deer on my way out that were kind of moving in a similar way. And so the route that they're using through that bedding is a lot different than I had anticipated. So it was like that
Yeah.
went into the memory bank too, that like the way I was setting up previously might not be the best bet because they're moving, instead of moving north and south how I thought they were through the bedding, they're actually moving east and west, which is why those deer that
Well,
came in directly toward me, like head on to me. They were walking right at me as opposed to walking across me how I thought they would.
yeah. Well, some of the lessons that I've pulled from doing this, late hunting and just hunting in general is that think about how many times that you've kind of gotten to stand early. You're like, oh, this is great. Everything's going to settle down and then it's going to be right. And you're sitting there and everything's perfect. And then an hour before dark, 30 minutes before dark, the damn wind changes
Mm-hmm.
because the wind drops and then the thermals start pulling in a different direction.
Yep.
Happens all the time, especially early season when it's warm.
Yeah.
And you're getting a thermal pull and you're basically getting a false wind. And then what happens is that as the sun dips behind the trees and it starts to cool down, the thermals start pushing the wind the way it was actually forecasted.
Right.
And that is a hard lesson that I really had a hard time learning that lesson. I never put it all together. And so going in too early sometimes is actually the kiss of death. And in my mind, I mean, that's just kind of what I've learned. And man, I like going in late to hunt afternoon, especially when you're hunting close to their bedding.
Yeah.
Because you making noise is not even on the same radar in my mind as them catching a whiff of you.
Right.
And I mean, stuff makes noise all the time.
Well, yeah.
They hear stuff all the time.
Yeah.
And so, but if they smell you, it's over. And then the other thing that I learned, especially when you're hunting close to bedding areas, is that you're thinking, okay, I've got this map in my head to where, okay, they're bedding here. They're going to get up. They're going to go head out towards this field or this food source or whatever. And it's going to be this like, guy going to work, punching the clock type thing. And that's not at all how it works a lot. A lot of times it is these deer will get up right at dark and they're going to move to another area within that bedding zone and just dick around for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But they're getting up and stretching their legs and they're going to go, hey, I'm going to go over here and hit this little, briar patch bit, mess around. And then when it's pitch black dark, then I'll make my beeline. And I've noticed that those deer will spend a lot of time milling and feeding, in these bedding areas because a lot of them are not a lot of canopy and the sun can get in and there's just brushy stuff. And like what you're talking about, if you can't get in a tree,
then
it's, getting good sunlight to the ground and they're in there picking on all that browse, just kind of moving around a little bit until it gets, completely a thing that you think they're going to do at 5:30.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that was the thing too. It's like I said, this piece is completely brand new to me. The first year I've hunted it, I scouted it off season, hung two cameras in there, and then ended up finding this one deer, and then found him, in a bean field nearby. And I just had a hunch that he might be bedded over near the private public line. And then I did a quick scout mission. I ended up bumping him out of his bed and found him. And so I kind of knew the general area that he might be spending some time. Now I know deer are going to start to, transition, just, I was hoping, that I could hold him there at least for maybe 2 weeks, until, October hit, so to speak. That way I'd maybe get an opportunity before he, shifted to his fall area. And so I did a drive by the bean field this evening after I hunted just to see if there were any deer in the field, and there weren't, which I didn't expect there to be, because there are a pile of acorns in there right now. And so the other thing that I kind of learned is like, okay, playing that travel route right now with him to the bean field, these does that these couple deer that I saw tonight kind of also told me like they weren't headed in the direction of the bean field. They were actually headed to this transition area in between two bedding areas, and we're coming to hit that.
They're just going and milling.
Yeah, they were going to hit that oak tree right where I was standing. Like they were making a beeline right toward that, because that's where in that general area, that was like the one place that I found that was dropping a ton of white oaks, or a white oak was dropping a ton of acorns, and they were headed right there. And and there was a ton of caps already there, and so I guarantee you they were going to stop there and munch. until they decided to head off if they did make it to that primary food source later, under dark or whatever. But they're already starting to spend a lot more time in the timber versus headed to primary food sources already. Even if, because this bean field's still
Yeah.
green, so it hasn't turned yet, but I'm sure it's on the verge of turning because there are plenty around that have turned around here already. So,
Yeah.
I feel like I probably need to, I'm hunting him kind of aggressive anyway. I was on the opening day, I was set up maybe 60, 70 yards outside of his bed or where I found him bedded. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so, I think that's just going to have to be my game plan here for this next week. And then, if I don't see him, if I don't see hide nor tail of him here in like the next week, I'm probably going to shift to like a different property where I know I have some other really good bedding, that I have some daylight pictures of bucks and stuff on that I might have an opportunity at. So I got a couple places to hop around, man. So we'll see what shakes out. But you've already been out west, kind of getting after it, kind of hard, man. Doing the western elk hunt, New Mexico, right? Is that where you were at?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I wouldn't use the term getting after it really hard. And I will get into that. But one of the things I kind of wanted to maybe wrap up
Yeah.
what we were just talking about there was something that I've kind of adage that I've kind of started to live by is that when it comes to killing big deer in pressured areas, whether it's public or private, one of the things that I've kind of lived by is that the more pressured the property is, and the harder it is to kill that deer. If you don't kill him with leaves still sticking on his fur, you're probably not going to kill him.
Right.
And
Yeah.
what I mean by that is that you better kill him within a few minutes of him standing up for the first time that afternoon.
Yeah.
And that has been, the a really, that's been a great lesson to learn. And it's been a great strategy to basically just push in, and just get closer, and get basically right up in the middle of where they're bedding as long as wind will allow.
Mm-hmm.
And so your approach, as long as your approach is what you're leaving in your back trail, as long as that's not where deer are, and you can push yourself up into a point in that bedding zone to where when that deer gets up and makes, minor moves, you're on him.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I've killed them.
Yeah.
And that's translated a lot into river bottom bucks that basically lay right along these riverbeds. And they'll lay right on these banks and things like that, and these little thickets, because it's super thick right along most of these riverbanks because of so much moisture. And they'll lay in there, and they just, they're just not going to move until it's just right at dark. And then when they do get up, they're going to get up and just mill around the woody browse, that's just right along the riverbank, and, just kind of peck around a little bit. And then once it's dark, they'll make their march, if you will. But, pushing up into those things to where you feel like, man, I'm going to screw this up. That's really the only way I've been able to kill pressure deer and really big deer that are just not, willing to move in the daylight early season. And it's a different game. If you have your own property or you're hunting a big piece of property that's not pressured, you have the luxury of waiting until the rut,
Right. Yeah.
But if you don't, that deer is going to get relocated by someone or something, or he's going to get, whatever, all kinds of things can happen. So, in my mind, for what you're doing, you've got to push it. I mean, you've got to just get in there and find a spot that you can see through, see through a zone, in that thick area where they're bedding, and slowly work your way up there to it if you're going to ground hunt.
Yeah.
Make sure the wind's right, get in there and just basically get in there late, take a knee, and just, hope that they're going to get up and push through that little crack you've got to shoot through.
Yeah. And the
That's
interesting,
how I've killed them, man.
yeah, man, the interesting part, and you're 100% right, man. Like I totally agree with you. There's a couple things you said I want to follow up on there. And one is the whole idea of him relocating. That's why it's like, for me, one of the things that I've just, learned over time and I'm trying to execute this year is, look, he's going to relocate for a multitude of reasons, whether it's because he transitions to his fall range, here during early season, if like he could be gone, right? he could get bumped multiple times. I'm not the only guy hunting this piece, so who knows how many human encounters he's had, and what that does to him. Whether it moves him off completely, or whether it's a combination of him transitioning to his fall range and being bumped multiple times, whatever the case is. So I'm always kind of the mind in early season, especially when, for me in PA, my opener is mid-September in the special regulations unit. The rest of the state comes in, end of September, beginning of
Yeah.
October. And so for me, it's like, I always look at it and say, look, the bucks I bumped the last 2 weeks of September probably aren't going to be the bucks that are in those same bedding areas come October. You know what I mean? After they transition
Absolutely.
and kind of shake around. So I almost look at it as like a get out of jail free card, where it's like, I can go balls to the wall, be super aggressive, try to get in on them. I either kill them or I bump them, and they bust me, and then they're gone. But then it's no factor, because there's going to be new deer that are going to take their place come October anyway, most likely, right?
That's right.
And so
and I've killed bucks that I never knew were there. Well, you know what? Let me rephrase that. I've killed bucks in areas that they weren't there. I had gone in and probably pressured, the deer I was trying to kill too hard, and ended up going in thinking that deer's still there, and then killing another big deer that I'd never seen, that had just slid into a really cool spot. He found, he's like, damn, this is tight here. I'm going
right.
to hang out there, because they're smelling deer and all that stuff in there. And,
yep.
But I mean, that's what's happening is you're getting into these spots that are comfort zones for deer, and you're picking up a new customer, and man, I hear what you're saying with the transition zones and the technical jargon and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, these things are looking for cover and protection when it's daylight, and they're looking for food when it's dark.
Right.
And in November, they're looking for what you and I are looking for every day. So,
right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, when you're hunting those deer outside of November, at the end of the day, you're really hunting one of two things: that comfort zone, or, that security zone, or the food.
Mm-hmm.
And 9 times out of 10, the food is going to be the younger animals, and the comfort zone, security zones are going to be the deer you're actually after. So,
yeah,
they're constantly going to be transitioning in and out of these thick places that they feel safe. And I'm a firm believer in just getting amongst them.
Yeah.
Just getting right up in the damn middle of them. And I can't tell you how many bucks I've killed along the thick riverbeds where we hunt a lot, that I've gone in and pushed a couple of does or a young deer out or something like that, and like, shit, and the deer
right.
goes bouncing out of there, and you're thinking, crap, I have blown this. And literally within minutes, that buck is up and looking to see what was going on.
Right.
It's not going down the way you think it is. It's not somebody sounding the alarm and everybody bugs out.
Yeah.
It's not the way it works. And big deer are not going to just get up and flee, if they don't know what it is. They got to get, they've got to get you in their nose or in their eyes or their ears, before they're going to make a decision to leave what they know is safe.
Right.
So, I mean, good grief, man. How many times do you see does just dicking around all the time? I've seen them blow to run other deer off an acorn tree.
Nice.
I mean, just big old nags.
Yep.
Just blowing like hell and freaking everybody out. And it's almost like you can see them giggle when everybody runs away, and then they just bury their head back down and start munching. So, these big deer hear that all the time. And I would say, push it to the limit, get right on top of them, get amongst them. I mean, if you're doing it right, man, half the time, if you're in the open stuff like the low, no canopy, kind of more open, brushy stuff, there's times where they're going to get up, and you can shoot them before they flee.
Yeah.
If you screw up and push too hard, but
right.
You're not going to kill them sitting back on the edge waiting for them to come to you.
Yeah. That's definitely, that it's, I just don't have enough patience for it either. I prefer to kind of get up in it and mix it up a little bit. And if I'm too aggressive, then, what I always kind of look at is like, I end up learning something from it, and I put that in my bag of tricks for the next time. But going back to like the whole noise thing, that you were talking about. Like I actually was thinking of that today while I was standing there and I had those couple deer come in, and because there were so many squirrels just dropping shit from trees and stuff like that, there was just constant sound to where I was like, a twig snapping as you're kind of going through. Like I think a lot. I mean, you want to be quiet as you possibly can. You don't want to go busting through brush and stuff like that and making a ton of noise. But there's just like, to me, there's almost an acceptable amount of like, I would term it like forest noise that you can create as a person that is going to be tolerable. If
Absolutely.
that makes sense, because I've also been setting up in a tree just scraping boots along bark in the past, and had, the one year I had one of the shooters that I was targeting, he walked into like 25 yards while I was getting in my tree, because I'm pretty sure he thought he heard someone scraping a tree, and he was just coming in to check it
Well,
out to see what was going on.
100%, 100%. I hunt out of a lone wolf climber. That the not the what I'm talking about, the
Yeah.
original lone wolf climber
Yep.
people. I hunt out of one of those probably more than anything, and I do it because they're so quiet, and I love everything about that whole system there, and I know it's not in vogue, to not be hunting out of a diaper and a frisbee strapped to the tree, but I like a climbing tree stand. I like the versatility of it. I can use that climber either to climb with, or I can, climb up and use it as a lock on. So I love the versatility of it. I love, I just like everything about it. And I would much rather go up a tree, with that lone wolf climber with that rubber belt,
Mhm.
and go up like that than hang, sticks in a stand,
Mhm.
because I'm going to make more noise and run more of a risk of banging metal or whatever, running sticks in a stand than I will with that climber. And I can get up so much faster.
Mhm.
Um, and so I like the versatility of it, but that's a long-winded version of me getting to the point of, can I tell you how many bucks I've had charge in on me, hair up, ears back, as I'm climbing, thinking that I'm a deer rubbing a tree.
Right.
I can't tell you how many bucks I've had charge in, ears back, hair up, when I'm sawing a limb,
Mhm.
thinking that's a buck rubbing a tree. So, what I guess my philosophy on noise is, um, that there's an acceptable level of noise. It's just kind of the cadence of that noise, how you're
Yeah.
walking in, walking out. As long as there's not a rhythm and cadence to it that is pretty noticeable to a deer, it's pretty acceptable. To me, what's not acceptable, that stands out louder than anything, is the attempt at silence.
Yes.
That single pop, and they look and they're listening like, okay, well, that was nothing, and then you hear something else, but it's all these little different things, and it's a person trying to tiptoe in.
Mhm.
To me, that stands out to a animal, not just deer, as abnormal. Is that attempt at silence instead of just moving through.
Right. Yeah. As soon as you said that, it's like I was thinking of just, again, squirrels obviously are, running rampant this time of year and
Yeah.
making tons of noise. And like if you listen to the way they make sound, it's like, it's there's not a specific cadence to it. It's very abstract, right?
No,
It's like
it
there's
is.
a scurry, and then there's like some scraping of bark, and then they knock a nut out of a tree, and then there's a thud, right? And then it's just like then there's leaves
Yep.
rustling, and it's just like, and so it's like if you think about it when you're walking through the woods, and that's the one thing I was thinking of today. The only the positive for getting my boots and using my Portland moccasins as you refer to them, which is awesome,
Yeah.
was that those things were ridiculously quiet, and the noise that I was making was just like I was paying attention to it as I was going, and I was like, man, I was like, I'm just really making like normal like woods noise. Like it's not overly loud, it's not too soft, it's not like there's a cadence to it or anything like that. It just sounds like something that's moving through that's nondescript. You know what I mean? And it doesn't
Well,
sound like there's a
I
ton of weight
do.
behind it. There doesn't sound like there's. It was just really interesting because as I got in and got set up, I was like, man, I was like, if I could find a pair. Now I understand why Native Americans were able to be so stealthy wearing moccasins. You know what I mean? Because it's just
Well,
like,
and that is well, it's an incredible testament to, the ingenuity of, and the genius of just having something out of necessity
hmm
versus having something out of comfort.
yeah,
I mean, you think about those moccasins, and that style is something that's born from necessity. And what we're wearing into the stand and into our hunts is something that's born for our need, for comfort.
hmm
And they're two different things, And so I can't tell you how many bucks I killed when I was in high school, in a pair of blue jeans and a pair of what were those boat shoes? Were they Sebagos?
oh man, I don't even.
Oh, I was asking my wife.
I can't think. I mean, I always called them
Sperry's.
penny
Yeah, Sperry's.
Sperry's. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So topsiders or whatever you want to call them. So, but I mean, that's what we wore to school. And so
Mm.
I was always ditching out, after third period and flying to to a piece of property to get in a stand to shoot any deer back then. With my bow, I didn't really care. But that's what I hunted in was, my Sperry topsiders and my blue jeans and my, plaid shirt that I went to school in. And so, I mean, who cares?
Yeah.
It was effective. And so, you think about going in now with these giant, rubber boots and the big soles, and you have no feeling or anything like that. You're just trudging in there.
Mm-hmm.
You were probably more effective today in your little, I'm sure they're checkerboard bands, but
They're not. They are. They are straight black, all black, murdered out.
Oh my gosh, I don't even know what's worse.
Nice. No, but you're right.
I do like those.
Yeah, they are pretty comfortable, man. It's like I've worn them for years. I call them my old man shoes because I just slip them on and slip them off. They're like slippers. But you're right, man. It's like, because it's funny. Like there would have been probably years past that like I would have been in my truck and realized I forgot my boots and been like either turned around and got my boots or just been like, screw it, I'm not hunting. You know what I mean? Like, and then I'll admit that, right? Because it's just like I'm very much a creature of habit. And if I don't have things kind of like in a structure and set up, it's like I sometimes I don't deal well with it. You know what I mean? Like it kind of throws me for a loop. It throws everything else like out of whack. And so I was driving today and I recognized that I forgot them. And like my first thought was like, man, I'm just going to turn around and get them. Then I was like, well, if I turn around and get them, like I might as well just stay home because I'm not going to make it there in time to like have a meaningful hunt. And then I was just like, hey, look, it's 80 degrees. I was like, I don't need boots. I was like, I just wear these Vans. I was like, and if it gets to a point that I got to cross water, I was like, I'll make a judgment call as to whether or not I'm going to cross, or if it gets really, really thick and briary and like I can't make it through because I need a pair of boots to kind of kick through the brush or whatever. I was like, then I'll make the call and maybe I'll just set up right there or whatever. I was like, but I'm just going to go in and see where I can get to, wearing these and see how the hunt plays out, and I'm glad that I did. And you're 100% right. I was way more quiet with those shoes on than I ever am in any pair of boots that I have, period. End of story. 100%.
Well, are you familiar with the company, Russell Moccasin Company?
I'm not.
They're out of Wisconsin. They're a 100-year-old company. They've been building custom moccasins and boots for like literally 100 years or more. It's an amazing company. I have a pair, or I have multiple pairs of them, but I have a pair of these pull-on boots.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, you ever seen the Orvis Gokies, the pull-on, like pull-on boots that just have like a little zipper in the back?
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. Well, Russell makes it's one called a Zephyr, and it's just a thin layer of leather. It's got like a crepe sole, and that was basically my uniform for the last 30 years. Nice. I wore them every day to work. I just pulled them on, zipped them up. They're incredible. They just break in. They're incredibly comfortable. And until, the last, 4 or 5 years, when I really started having like back problems and things,
mm-hmm.
From accidents and things like that, is I had to start wearing something that had more support and things like that. But that is the boot that I wore every day. And I would never take them off, even to go hunting. It's just, I'd hunt in them. They'd get wet. I'd spray them off. And then the next day I'd pull them on and go back to work. But they're soft, soft soled at the bottom, super comfortable, easy to get on and off. But durable I never got into you had to have these fancy boots to hunt, especially when it's warm. If I'm wearing any kind of substantial boot, it is only for, number one, waterproof when it's cold. Yeah. That's the only thing I need out of a boot is waterproof when it's cold. Other than that, I don't really care. And I think we've talked before, I don't even wear insulated boots. Even when it's cold, I pull the boot blankets over.
Yep. Yeah, I started doing that last year, and that was really effective. Like, I preferred
the game changer.
Yeah, it totally is. The other thing I started doing too, because I went non-insulated last year, and what I started doing, and it fits the way I like to hunt because I like to move a lot. And so I would set up, and then if my feet started getting cold, I would sit until they got so cold that I couldn't take it anymore. And then that told me it was time to get down and move and find deer. And I would just get down and I would scout and go find the next setup. And that's how I hunted the whole trip in Iowa. That was how I would decide when I was going to move, was when my feet got cold.
Well, the boot blankets over an insulated boot is going to outperform any type of built-in insulated boot you could buy.
Yeah.
Period. There's no comparison. Especially, taking into account that the feet are not just completely saturated in sweat by the time you walk into a tree in an insulated boot.
Yeah.
So that was definitely a game changer. But yeah, I mean, that's a cool experience that you had today, though. I mean,
yeah,
if you go hunting, you come out and you're just kind of kicking yourself and what you're considering not a good hunt, you're missing the boat, because learning, something super cool like that on just a simple lesson, I mean, it just keeps adding to that, arsenal of knowledge. And,
yeah,
that's the key to becoming super consistent.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause there's a couple things I learned today, like a couple takeaways, which was, one, I learned how they were kind of moving in that bedding area, right? Two, learned that there are, a ton of white oaks in that general area, because I saw some on Saturday and I saw some in this particular spot. And so the deer are definitely staying in there longer versus headed out to crop fields. So that was like the other, kind of, learning lesson. And then the third one was I finally figured out the access for this particular area of this piece that I want to hunt this particular deer on, so it was those three things where I was like, walking out going, you know what? Had an opportunity at a deer, got busted on the ground, still learning the whole ground thing, and so, but it was cool to have a close encounter on my second ground hunt, and then learn those couple things about that area. I was like, man, this is a win all the way around. And I got to spend a couple hours in the timber, man. And that never sucks. I mean, I might've got malaria from all the mosquito bites I got while I was out, but aside from the malaria, I did pretty good. But man, so
malaria is nothing.
What's that? Malaria is nothing anymore.
Yeah, that's some lightweight stuff compared to the crap we're dealing with now.
Yeah, exactly. But man, I want to talk a little bit about, I know, you folks in the South had some really bad storms, that came through, obviously. And I know you were helping some folks out today and talking to some folks that had it pretty bad. But I wanted to ask you, man, when storms like that come through and you have the type of flooding that you guys are dealing with in the area where you live, and and further south, mm-hmm. whatever the case is, like, what does that do to the deer? I mean, how is it in terms of, like, when they get displaced, do they come back to where they were previously when the water recedes, or does it move them and kind of displace them for the season? Like, how do you go about hunting an area where you think maybe you knew what was going on, then all of a sudden you've got this really extreme flooding, and then it recedes, and then deer season opens? It's like, do you hunt it like you hunted it before? Is it shot in the ass, or like, what's, how do you kind of deal with that?
Well, I think you hear me say a lot, especially when it comes to setting up bows and things like that. I say one size doesn't fit all. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that that I kind of learned and started applying years ago is that when you start trying to apply a set of rules or a scenario or patterns, quote patterns, if you will, to what whitetails do, you're totally pigeonholing yourself. when you start trying to figure out these let's say tendencies or certain traits or patterns of things that these deer do in certain scenarios, it's the kiss of death, because guys can talk on the podcast all they want about what this deer is going to do in this scenario, what they're going to do in this pattern, this time of year, yada yada yada. If they're going to flood, they're going to move to this type of property, and then once it recedes, they move to this type of property and stage there. Man, I am one of the guys that I just kind of want to know. I want to know where the big deer are living, and make sure that I've got big deer in the area I'm hunting, and I want to basically hunt them day to day, and figure it out. And so that's a long-winded way of answering your question. I've grown up hunting, floodplain, areas that flood, for whitetails my entire life. One of my favorite places that I've hunted the longest, is constantly, you never know how much water is going to be in there. And they are constantly doing something different, for sure. But I can tell you that, like, I remember coming home from Oklahoma one year, and we were coming down the west side of the Mississippi River, and there's levees on either side of the river, big huge levees, earthen dams that were built by the Corps of Engineers years and years ago to try to protect from flooding. And it was a major flood event. It was in November, right before Thanksgiving, and I remember coming home through this horrible storm, and water was everywhere. And I remember looking across these ag fields, maybe, I don't know, 300 or 400 yards from the highway to the levee, because the road, as it runs between Mississippi and Louisiana, as you're coming down, headed towards maybe Vicksburg, the levees are, and the road is right along along the river. And I remember looking across, and the whole way down for, I don't know, 80, 90 miles, until I hit the interstate, there were hundreds of deer stacked up, just standing on top of this levee, and nowhere else to go. I remember seeing just, dozens of bucks in groups, just standing there. It was one of the most amazing things I'd ever seen. And I've watched deer under major flood events, deer that I know that are not old enough to know, to have experienced a major flood event. But I've watched them go to the same places every time. And I don't know if it's just that these deer are so familiar with their terrain and their surroundings and, the area that they live, their home range, that they know, high ground, low ground, and they know the difference. Maybe, I don't know, but that's one of the things it's always puzzled me, because I remember there were these mud mounds that these deer used to push up on, when the water would get real high, and it was just a slam dunk. I mean, if you got in there a couple hours before dark, carried your climber in, waded in, knee deep, thigh deep water, wade your way in, climb up downwind that side of one of those mud mounds. When the sun came up, it looked like, ducks coming to you. You could just see the V in the wakes and the deer moving towards those mud mounds to get up out of the water and bed. And it was like shooting fish in a barrel. And that worked for a while. And then it's like they adapted, quit doing it, and they would just bed, in a little bit shallower area, right in the water, in the thick stuff, and wouldn't come to the mud mounds anymore. And then they'd start doing it again. So it's never this repetitive thing with whitetails. It's always like they're, like, year to year, it's just this, I don't know, they're doing something different. And I think that, when people become more pliable and more adaptable to what's happening in their current condition, their current time, when they're hunting, I think they're going to become a lot more successful, because guys end up spending so much time hunting something that they've had success in their past, or historical data, in their mind of this is where they're going to be this time of year. And you end up wasting so much time until you figured out, hell, they're not doing that now. They're doing something different this year for whatever reason.
Right.
I think that's an incredible key to success on big whitetails, is just being extremely adaptable and keep moving until you figure out what they're doing right now, you
Right.
know?
Yeah. I've
But
often kind of been a believer that a lot of times people's past success is their kiss of death almost,
yeah,
because they start to buy into the idea that approach is ironclad, or it's something that they did is the reason why they had success, and if they can just repeat that, they'll repeat the success, or they go back to the same stand or tree location because they've had success there, and it really what it was is it just was right choice, right decision at the right time, put them at the right spot, that one instance. It's one of the reasons why people I'll get questions like, why do you always hunt different pieces of public? Like, you never seem to hunt the same public year over year. And because what I found is, I'll go back to what I said earlier. It's like I'm very regimented with things. Like if something goes awry, like with my prep, it kind of throws me for a little bit of a loop. But it's odd because when I actually get into the timber, I don't really have a method. It's really kind of like it's just going off of what I'm seeing and what I'm feeling is how I set up and how I
yep,
move and how I move. And one of the reasons why I hunt different places year over year and try not to hunt the same general parcels, if I can help it, year over year, is because I go in with a clean slate of not knowing where there was success previously. And it keeps me from being romanticized in a particular area or a particular setup or a particular access point or anything like that. It's like there's no romantic value to any of it. It's all binary, that it's either going to work or it's not going to work. Or let me put it this way. I either think it's going to work or I don't think it's going to work. And I make my decision
yeah,
based off of that. That there's not well, it did this the last time. There is none of that because I don't have an experience there. So everything is brand new, and I'm just using brand new information every hunt to make a decision to try to put myself in a position where I think I'll have success. And that's why I like it. To me, that that you know that lack of information to me is actually very freeing. And I actually had, when I started hunting that way, I actually started enjoying the hunts more often, because what I tell people is like, I feel like I'm actually hunting then, because I'm actually going, I'm trying to find the deer and kill the deer. I'm not waiting for
yep.
it. I'm actively pursuing, and to me that, like, it allows me to be and start be feel and think more like a predator. And so then I can take more aggressive action, and in a weird way I feel like I'm way more calculated when I do that too. So
Well, and that is a that it kind of that is a great segue into you asking about the New Mexico hunt. We were in there last year and got into an area that I'd hunted previously, and it was just on fire. It was some of the best elk hunting, I had in recent years, for sure.
mhm.
It almost felt like the old days, it's so good. Um, and so, of course, this year we went out there earlier based on, a lot of different circumstances. I didn't really want to go the first part of the season, but I just didn't have a choice.
Mhm.
Um, but I knew as I approached that 15th date that it was going to get better. It just was going to get better and better every day. So we got out there on the 5th, immediately went into the area where we just had, hunt, hunt of a lifetime, day after day last year. And they just weren't there.
Hmm.
I mean, that when I say they weren't there, they just were not there. And it was extremely dry, um, real dusty. Water was certainly going to be the key. There's just, if the elk were there, they had to be going to water.
Right.
And so finding the water that was still available was super important, which we did. But again, it's just like big deer. Those elk are just not going to, on public land, they're just not going to come walk, sashaying up to a water hole at, an hour before dark.
Right.
If you catch one during there in the daylight, it's kind of a fluke. I mean, it can happen, don't get me wrong, but the odds are not really in your favor. So once we keyed on that, and saw that there were elk actively hitting these very few water holes that were available, I had to start kind of dissecting the circumstances. I started having to figure out, okay, they're not where they were. There's only so many places they can be. They have to come to these few water sources. Some of them are completely fouled because some, you go to some of the better water holes, and some jack wagons would have a, 3-tent camp with 3 pickups parked next to the water hole with their
Right.
tents and camps set up,
Right.
That's public land hunting. And, as I've gotten older, I just, I don't go scold people anymore and
Right.
call them on the carpet. I just move on. It's not worth it, but you kind of want to.
Yeah.
But anyway, we spent the first 5 days of 10 days of hunting really just trying to crack the code. And it was funny because basically the main access road that runs north and south through the area that we hunted, it has these, big ridge tops or mountains, if you will, that run parallel to the road, and they're, a quarter mile left, quarter mile right of the road. It's like going right up an alley,
Mm-hmm.
and I would continuously stop and glass, at the tops of these, facing slopes that were facing towards the road on one side, because it was kind of a northwest facing, the ridge for 3 miles was northwest facing basically on an average, with lots of draws and things. So it's perfect kind of scenario where they want to be, but it's right by the road.
Mm-hmm.
And I was continuously stopping and glassing, and Zach, which by the way, I owe you an incredible thanks for that. What a stud that guy is, and a ball to be around. But anyway,
Nice.
Zach and Jake that I was hunting with, they kept kind of like, I could tell they were like, man, why are you stopping and glassing right here off the road where everybody comes up and down? I just continuously was doing it. And I kept saying, there's nowhere else they can be. All of these elk in this unit have to be on this 3-mile run of ridge. There's nowhere else they can be because they're going to the water in the dark. We're not seeing them in the day. We're blowing by this stuff every day. They have to be there. And so I was a little incapacitated. I've had some incredible back issues last month, and it just kind of escalated on that 24-hour drive out there.
Right.
In the truck, and I was by myself, so I, drove the whole way where I couldn't really spell myself and let somebody else do it. And so I just, man, I've experienced a lot of pain that I hadn't experienced before, and I was really just not as mobile as I could be. So I was spending a lot of time getting high up, on peaks and stuff and glassing, and then sending Jake and Zach off, in directions, to try to, intercept some elk that we were seeing. But on day 5, we went up into this area, and I said, man, they've just got to be here. They've got to be working off this ridge right off the road, this whole system of ridges. And sure enough, I mean, we weren't even halfway up this trail, and this huge bull comes over the hill in front of us, pushing this herd of cows. I mean, a big bull, screaming his head off. And we're like, okay, we're in them. And so the back half of the trip, we were in them. We were just, cracking that code. But as we would get, the mornings would kind of get up, and we were getting close to them, they would just vanish. Literally, they'd just vanish. And they were just dipping over that ridge and laying above the main road that everybody was driving by every day. And this was multiple groups, not just one group of elk.
Wow.
It was multiple groups scattered up and down this system of ridges for 2 or 3 miles. And so finally I was like, man, it's like what you're saying. You're figuring out what's happening then, at the time, at the moment, and you're dissecting the information you got, and you're trying to put a plan together. And I thought, hey, look, they have to be going to this particular water hole or this one. They've got to be going, this way to get to it. There's no way, based on where we've been, they're going any other direction. So the last day we got set up where we thought they were going to come in the morning, and man, we were in them. We had bull after bull, getting close, but we've got stick bows, so we're limited on our range. We had some really close encounters. I was kicking myself on some small bulls and cows that I'd passed. And so once the bulls had gone off to bed, and there were so many in there fighting and pushing each other out, we knew at that point that, hey, we saw one bull going, to the east. Well, there's no way he went any further than that draw, because if he did, he would have had to walk out across the whole entire open meadow in, 10 o'clock in the morning. He's not going to do that. So he's there. and he's going to be coming this way. And these other elk have to be right where we think they are. And so that's where we set up that last day. And exactly, it took us 10 days to get there, but it all came together, and the bulls converged right where we were. And we got one in within 12 yards on Jake. And the bull popped up in front of him. He was shooting a stick bow, and the bull was quartering to him. And, he took the shot he thought he could make. And I would tell you 99 times out of 100, if Jake draws that bow, there's usually going to be fried chicken on the other. I mean, he's death with that thing. But he got it right on the shoulder button, like the 3-inch square. You don't want to shoot an elk. That's where he got him. And, not even a mortal wound. And so, I mean, we put it all together. We just didn't close it. And, but I can tell you that spending that 10 days with him and Zach was probably, out of all the years I've hunted, that's probably the best group experience I've had, good hunting or bad.
Right.
As far as like attitudes and enjoyment and being around people. So, if you're going to be packing that big hairy mustache around with you filming this year, you're going to have a ball.
Good.
he is the best, man.
Nice. Yeah. I'm looking for it. I'm glad you guys got a chance to connect. We've had a chance to talk a little bit, a couple times here and there, and he seems like a really good dude. I'm looking forward to spending some time with him here in November, man. I'm glad you got into the elk though, man. It's like, and that was the point I was kind of making, man, was that it's that idea of hunting and having to figure it out. You know what I mean? Like that to me is the hunt. That's the, I was telling someone the one day, I was like, we've got eyes in the front of our head. Like we're predators. That's what we are. Right. And that to me, it's like when I started approaching hunting that way, it just became that much more enjoyable, because I was truly hunting. I wasn't waiting for something to happen. I'm pushing the envelope and being aggressive and, giving the deer hell or elk or whatever it is I'm hunting. You know what I mean? That's just how I like to do it now. But I want to transition back to whitetails here really quick. Cause I know we talked in the past, the past 2 sessions you and I did together, we talked a little bit about bow setups and stuff like that. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about just, setting up a bow, effectively for hunting whitetails. Right. Like what your approach is for that versus how you might do it any other way. Cause this year, I did some dialing of my bow, and then actually at the last moment, I actually ended up swapping bows, and went with a completely different manufacturer. And since I did that, like I've been shooting lights out and just like, how when you ever have a bow that you just can't ever seem to get to tune, like you just can't get it to have an arrow spin for you. And then when you finally kind of shoot a bow, whether it's the same one, whether you get it tuned, and it tunes for you, or whether you change it up and you shoot a different bow, and all of a sudden now the arrow's coming out like you want it to come out, how it just like, you have this feeling of relief and you're like, hell yes, that's what it's supposed to look like. When I put my pin there, that's where the arrow lands. That's the experience I had. So I had that trying time this year of just kind of trying to get, cause I was in that bad headspace of like, when I was shooting, I was at the point where I wasn't sure if it was me or the bow, and it was just, so that was part of the reason why I was just like, you know what, I'm going to go and kind of change things up. And if I'm still struggling, then I know that I'm having some issues. If it's not, then I've solved the Rubik's Cube. And part of it was just, I was working with a rest that had broken. I had rebuilt it and stuff like that. And so part of it was just like some of my gear was failing on me, like on the bow. Which was causing some of the issues. And so once I rectified that, it was spinning. But I want to hear from you, because I know that you kind of have a way that you like to set things up for hunting whitetails specifically.
I do. So one thing I would say is that for anybody listening, 9 times out of 10, it is you.
Oh yeah. Yeah. 100%.
9 times out of 10, you can't shoot good enough to really make whatever flaws you have in your bow system really matter. And that's what people need to work on more than anything is their form, the grip, the release. That's where it's at.
Yeah.
The grip, the release. That's where bow hunting happens. That's where air flight comes from. The tune of the bow, everything, the setup, all that does is either magnify your flaws or it masks them. It'll mask your flaws depending on how well it's set up. So that's one thing that people really need to keep in mind. Very rarely is it the gear that's causing poor flight and poor shooting. So, chase, the best execution of the shot that you can make, shoot the best that the bow you have can shoot, and then make adjustments.
Right.
Most people will run straight to the shop or whatever and start tinkering with their gear. But, and I'm not being, ugly about it. I'm just trying to give people reality and facts. It's normally us. It's normally not.
Oh yeah.
So,
100%. I mean, I know, like, even whenever I'm, when I'm, tuning, or whether I'm at the shop or wherever, I have a little paper tuning set up here at the house. It's, when I shoot a bullet hole, I might shoot a bullet hole 1 out of every 4 or 5 arrows that I put through paper, and it's because those other 4 was just, I torqued my grip a little bit, my release wasn't right, whatever the case was, you know what I mean? And so I 100% believe that, for sure.
Well, it's just facts. I mean, but anyway, when it comes to setting up a bow for a whitetail, and I don't, we're talking about compounds, but, if I'm setting a bow up for anything, I really don't vary much other than maybe how many sight pins I have. Other than that, the bow really doesn't get changed. But for argument's sake, or for the sake of this discussion, we'll talk about setting up a whitetail bow. Okay. So I'm a firm believer in, eliminating the need for the weakest link in my system, which is my brain. I want to eliminate the need to have to use that thing. Okay.
Right.
So, I and I also want to eliminate the chance that any equipment failure is going to happen, no matter how rare, how crazy, how low of a percentage. I want to eliminate anything that it has a percentage of failure. So the way I set a bow up for whitetails is, for any bow, I do not shoot drop away rests. I do not shoot. If I could weld everything to my bow and not have any moving parts, that's what I would do. No screws, no bolts, no nothing. I want it simple. I want it quiet. I want it efficient, and I want it fail safe. So I have shot a drop away rest once. It failed. I threw it out in the woods, and I went right back to a full capture rest, like a whisker biscuit. Now, what those rests do, again, is they amplify your flaws. But if you will actually learn to shoot and learn to be extremely accurate with that, you're going to have perfect form and you're going to execute perfect shots in the field. The drop away rest is masking your flaws for you. So when that thing fails, you're screwed. And they fail all the time. There's too many springs, moving parts, cords that can move up and down. It's just a recipe for failure. And in whitetail hunting, my world ends at 30.
Right.
If you're going to shoot at a whitetail past that, you're rolling the dice, especially pressured whitetails. So I set up my bow as simple as it can possibly be. And I basically I'm setting it up just like a rifle would, for your max point blank range, which means the distance that you can hold a pin on a target based on whatever size that target is and hit the target where you want it. So for our argument, let's say that we're talking about a 5 or 6 inch square is our target on a whitetail. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's the center of the vitals. All right. Now our target is certainly bigger than that, but if you're striving to hit within that, magic triangle where the lungs dump into the heart, the arteries from the top of the lungs dump into the heart, and
Right.
heavy vascular area in that thoracic cavity, you're talking about a 5 to 6 inch square. So what is my max point blank distance to stay on that target? And it's, for me, it's 30 yards with my setup. And so what I do is I have a fixed pin, which I actually don't shoot a pin. I shoot a crosshair, because I want to see the entire target. I don't want the pin blocking. I want to see all the way around what my point of impact is going to be, and have as open field of vision as possible, especially in low light. It's so critical in low light to not have a pin block it out. But I set up that crosshair to where my zero is 25. And at 15 yards, I'm 3 inches high. And at 30 yards, I'm 3 inches low. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So there's my 6 inch max point blank range, my top to bottom of that kill zone. So, but everybody knows that, depending on how far a deer is away from you, especially, let's talk about tree stand hunting. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Tree stand hunting, your point of impact is going to vary as far as the height of it, the high and the low, based on how far away that deer is from the base of your tree, right? So,
Right.
You're looking at that animal because you're wanting that arrow to go through, and you want to pass through, the greatest amount of vitals, at whatever angle the arrow is going to pass through. So, for a close range shot, you're going to want your point of impact a little higher, right? So you can get through more vitals. And then, of course, as the further you get out, the more you get to a perfectly broadside, less of an angle, you're going to want to have that thing a little bit lower, because you're going to want to go through, say, the center of the lungs, top of the heart. You're not want to come through it at an angle. So you don't want the same point of impact. But if you think about the way I set my bow up, if I aim at the same spot on a whitetail with my setup, let's say that I'm aiming, say, 6-7 inches above the brisket, not above brisket, above the belly, at the top of basically the golden triangle, right?
Mm-hmm.
What someone would consider the perfect impact point. Well, let's say that that's where I'm going to aim on a deer 0 to 30, regardless of where he is. So let's say that the deer's 13, 14 yards below me, but I'm aiming at the same place every single time, regardless of where he is. My point of impact is going to be 3 inches higher than that point of aim, but it's exactly where I want it to hit.
Mm-hmm.
You want it to be a little higher close in. And then at 25, you're going to want to be, 20 to 25, it's within an inch. You're going to want to be right on that perfect top of the golden triangle, basically. And you want to hit that deer perfect. So you hold right on. Now, if that deer is at 30, I'm a man of faith, and I know from 0 to 30 that if I hold on that same spot, when the arrow gets there, that deer in that spot is not going to be in the same spot. It's going to be dropping away. It's going to be, the bottom's falling out.
Right.
That deer is going to be dropping. It's not going to happen. So, but let's say that I shot at that deer at 30 and he did not move. I would hit him low or miss him under his brisket, something like that, or hit the bottom of the heart. Most likely still going to kill him.
Mm-hmm.
If you hit him a little bit lower, but he is going to move. He is going to fall and gather himself and build his legs to take off. And so what you'll find is that same point of aim at 30, the arrow will 9 times out of 10, not only will it not impact there, it'll actually be above it, because the deer will end up dropping, 5, 6, 8, 10 inches, depending on how keyed up they are and how, if you grunt at them and they stop and look at you and you shoot at 30, you're going to be shooting well above that point of aim, because they're going to drop 8 or 10 inches before it gets there. So
Right.
That's how I hunt. I have literally one point of aim basically, if you took a deer and let's say that you had that deer, let's say you had that deer and you painted a stripe around him all the way around him, or let's say you put him in a tub of say blue dye, okay,
Mm-hmm.
and you raise that water up to that point of aim, and so you've got a basically a line all the way around him.
Mm-hmm.
You with me?
Yep.
Well, that is the elevation, regardless of whichever angle that deer is facing, quartering away, quartering to, broadside, whatever. That is the point of aim. That is the elevation on that deer that I'm going to aim around that thing 360.
Hmm.
That's where the pin is going to be. You never change where your pin rests on that deer, and you get into such a repetitive nature with it to where you don't really care as long as he's inside your wire. He's inside that 30 that you've established, and you know it before you get in your tree and you establish your 30 all the way around you. He's inside the wire. You hold in the same place, execute your shot, and it's a vital shot every single time.
Right.
You've just eliminated your need for a rangefinder. You've eliminated your need for multiple pins. You've eliminated your need for your brain, which that's what I'm trying to get out of the way all the time, is how do I eliminate the need for my brain? And the other thing is, you don't have a sight that could possibly be off. You don't have a movable sight that you forgot you shot at 40 yesterday and left it. You just shot over a deer at 20 yards.
Right.
You don't have a movable rest that's going to get a stick hung in it that you don't see, and it's not going to fall away. You don't have one that's going to have the ripcord get dragged by something that you don't see when you're pulling your bow up, and it doesn't execute properly. And then your bow's deadly silent. Nothing's moving, nothing's rattling, nothing's changing, no springs, no pulleys, no nothing. It's just quiet execution,
Right.
And that's the key for me,
Right. I set
the
up.
industry has told us other things.
Right. Right. I set up similarly, but like the one part that I haven't done yet, is I don't think my window is as tight as yours is. What's your I guess let me ask what your draw length in pounds are. If you're, I know you shoot stick bow, but if you're shooting,
Yeah, I shoot. Well, I shoot a compound a lot still.
Do you? Okay.
So, oh yeah, I do because in the last 3 or 4 years, I've really gotten back into the compound shooting a lot because for me, it's a responsibility that I've taken on with this company to help guys become more efficient.
Right.
And if I'm not using the gear they're using, I'm out of the loop. I can't relate.
Right.
And I think that's unfair. I mean, I think it would be disingenuous for me to say, hey, I know what I'm talking about. Call me and I'll help you get what you need. And then they call and I'm like, oh, I shoot a stick bow. I don't know anything about those things. So
Right.
I've gotten back into shooting a compound, and I've shot just about every one of them out there. And there's not a lot of difference in performance with regards to speed and all that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a huge difference with regards to noise and vibration. Yeah. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for that extra 5 feet per second. I could care less. I want that deadly quiet, no vibration, dead in the hand.
Yeah.
Easy to tune, easy system bow. The extra 5 feet per second doesn't matter if it's loud and you can't keep it tuned.
Right.
So I'm shooting, a 28.5-inch draw, and I shoot 70 pounds, and I shoot a 550 grain arrow out of a compound.
Okay.
So, and my that max point blank range, I have a high and low delta of 6 inches.
Right.
That's the total spread 0 to 30. I don't know that yours would be much different than that, but if it is, let's just say for argument's sake that it would be 9 inches. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, now you're talking about 4.5 high at 15 and 4.5 low at 30. Who cares?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm pretty close to that because what I'm using right now is I have it set at this bow. It's 29 yard single pin. I leave it set at 29 yards. And and I know basically I know at 30 it's like I'm pretty dead on at 30. Like if I hold the pin where I want it, that's where it lands. And I know as I get closer, if I'm up around like 20 yards, I do start to shoot probably a good 4 inches high, right? And there's this weird
Yeah.
there's this weird area that I hit 15 yards, and from 15 yards and in, it's the same as holding it at 30. There's just like there's this movement from 30 incrementally up to 15 where I'll be shooting high. But once I hit that 15-yard mark, it lands the same spot as my 30-yard mark. And so I'm doing something.
Well, what it is, it's well, no, it's leaving your bow. You haven't.
Yeah, it
Your
hasn't gone up
arrow
and
is
down
still
yet.
coming through to. Well, yeah, it hasn't passed your sight plane yet.
Yeah.
So it's just like a rifle. I mean, it's you can basically take a rifle that would be, say, a 0 at 250. That would be 6 inches low at it'd be 6 inches low at 300. If you've got a rifle that's got that ballistic,
Mm-hmm.
you basically can guarantee that somewhere between 40 and 50 yards, it's zeroed again.
Right.
Because the bullet's passing the line of sight, and that's the same thing that's happening with your bow. So, for me, instead of having, and I used to do that. I used to have my bow sighted in dead on at 30, so I could have, that's what I wanted, and I would be a little bit higher in that mid-range.
Mm-hmm.
But when I shoot 90% of my deer between 20 and 25 yards, that's where I want it to be, dead on. And the other thing is that as I've shot a lot of whitetails over the years and realized that they're not like, they're not like the cartoons. They don't jump up on their toes and go up in the air when you shoot at them. Whitetails use gravity
Right.
to get away. They go down, they gather their leg muscles, and they fall away and back.
Yeah.
That's what they do. And, it's funny because one of the things that was really interesting to learn, which I actually learned this in Africa and then came back and applied it to other species that I hunted, is that some species have a tendency to gather themselves and push forward. So hogs will do that a lot. Hogs will gather themselves and push forward, but they're not consistent. But very rarely do you see a whitetail, gather himself and lunge forward. It's always down, back, and away.
Right.
They're like feigning a right hand cross.
Right.
A mule deer has an incredible tendency to gather and push forward. An antelope gathers, a pronghorn gathers and push forward. So as you learn what these different species do, which we're getting off topic, I guess, because we're talking about whitetails, but as you learn what they do, that, hey, if I'm antelope hunting, I'm not going to shade back from that crease on the shoulder as much as I would, like, say, on a whitetail, because he's not going to fall down and away and bring his vitals into that path of that arrow. He's going to push forward, and he's going to bring those guts into it. So I want to hold more on that leg on mule deer and antelope and, hogs and things like that. And then on whitetails, I want to shade a little bit further back because they're going to drop, gather, they're going to be falling away from you and spinning away. So they're going to be spinning their head towards their tail. And that's just how they react the, high percentage of the time.
Right.
So if you've got your setup set up to where you're gambling, but you're betting, 99 times out of 100, that deer is going to be dropped at least 3 or 4 inches at 30 yards before your arrow gets there. Mm-hmm. Well, why wouldn't you have your point of impact 3 or 4 inches below what your pin is?
Right.
So you're hitting them right where you want them every single time. It has become an absolute fail-safe system for me. And now you're not, that's another calculation in your head that you're not having to go through. How far is he? That calculation's out. Right. Number 2, where should I hold? That calculation's out. There's no more figuring anymore.
Right.
You just draw, hold on that same, tape line on him all the way around him, whichever way he's facing. You draw, hold it on him, he's in the wire, and you kill him. There's no brain power involved.
Yeah,
I think that's probably why I like the trad bow so much.
Right. No, it's like you're making me think about it, because that was the one thing I was trying to work to eliminate. Because last year, the way I was set up, I was having to do some thinking. And the reason I ended up moving my pin to 29, because I was like, man, at 29, I was like, at 30, I hold right on. I was like, and anything in from 29 to 15, I hold at heart level, bottom of the heart, and let it rip, and I'm good. And then beyond that, other than that, I hold it dead on where I want it. You know what I mean? Like that was, so I tried to eliminate part of like, am I holding off? Am I holding low? So now it's just like, I either hold on or I'm holding low. Like those are the only two options.
Yeah, but
But
you
I
think
like
about
the
this though.
idea
You got to
of, I was just going to
one
say, I like
spot.
the idea of like letting him fall into it and knowing that I'm going to always hold it in the same place. Like that's just it.
Well, you think about this. Hunting, rutting whitetails. If you're in the peak of the rut and they're pushing does hard, I can't tell you how many times I've heard the buck coming on a doe. You can hear that cadence of that, that like a Tennessee Walker horse. You can
Yeah.
hear it when they start doing that high step,
Mm-hmm.
and okay, he's on a doe. They're coming. I can't tell you how many times I've drawn my bow and he's popped out at say 30. And as soon as he pops out, I'm like, okay, he's in the wire. And they're coming. He stops for a half a second at 10 yards and the arrow's off and through him. Well, I don't have to go through the process of where do I need to hold? Okay, he's coming. Where do I need to hold? He's getting closer. How far is, I don't have to go through any of that shit. I hold on the same place regardless of where they are. And here's the other thing. If you're dead on at 30 and you hold where you want to hit him at 30 and he's keyed up, you're going to hit that deer high.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, you're going to hit that deer higher and you're going to lose him. And I promise you that out of all the deer I've tracked in 30-something years of doing this, the majority, like high percentage of whitetails or any animal that gets away is the result of a high hit.
Right.
It's not guts. It's not low. It's not forward. Not anything. It's high.
Right.
The high hits is what lets them get away. And so you just want to eliminate that. You want to eliminate that out of the whole, the whole thing. I remember when some really popular podcast guys came down to Alabama for the first time in February to hunt with me, and they were so fired up to be hunting whitetails for the first time. Or one of them was hunting for the first time. But they had not, spent a lot of time hunting whitetails. And they shot a bunch of deer in a week. And if they killed 6 deer that week, they spined 4 of them. And these guys are shooters. I mean, they can shoot. Right. And once you get past that 20, 25 yard mark, you're shooting at a moving target. Yeah. You're shooting at a falling away target. The bottom's falling out of it. And I kept trying to tell them they were taking 30-yard shots. I'm like, look, guys, you've got a 30-yard pin. They'd say yes. I say, okay, well, put your 30-yard pin on their belly. Like, put it on their white hairline at the bottom. Do not hold on that deer. Hold off that deer. That's the only way you're going to kill it. They would not do it, and they kept shooting over, or they'd spine them. And finally, they got to where they were doing it, and they became efficient. And then they can do it at 20 and 25. They can, drop 6-8 inches on you.
Right.
So having that single point of impact, that single point of aim, it basically takes all of that into account as well. So you don't have to think about, gosh, how much was this deer going to drop? You don't have to think about any of that stuff. It's one point of aim, and all of that is taken into the calculation on it, and it's just draw, aim, shoot, regardless of where he is.
Right.
For the Midwestern guys that are hunting, big open country whitetails, those deer are not quite as smart as some of the more eastern whitetails. They don't react as violently. It's like the further east you get, the more violent they react, and the further south you get, the more violently they react even more.
Yeah.
Well, as you get into Kansas, Oklahoma, Iowa, that kind of stuff, Missouri, some of those places, those deer, they're big body deer. They don't react quite as fast. They're not as sketchy. And you don't have to allow for that much of a drop. And, I would say I would feel comfortable, on a Midwest whitetail taking a 40-yard shot.
Right.
When I say Midwest, as you're shading more Western,
Yeah.
Kansas type, more open country deer, they're just not as wary. And I mean, don't get me wrong, they're still whitetails, they're still hard to kill, but they're not reacting as violently, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So ethically, I would feel okay taking a 40-yard shot on a completely unaware whitetail buck. I would, if he saw me and was on red alert and at 40, I would take that 40-yard shot possibly, but that 40-yard pin would literally be on his belly hair.
Right.
It would be behind his leg on the bottom of his chest. It would basically be off the deer.
Yeah.
And literally that's how I hunt them. I mean, I'm planning on them to fall.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to go. I'm gonna do a little tinkering, man, because I had a similar setup last year, and then I switched it up a little bit, but I think I'm gonna maybe have to make some quick adjustments, because that's the only thing that really that I don't want to go as far as to say that concerns me, but that's the only part of like my sequence that I've not been able to kind of really feel 100% like I've figured it out. Like everything else I feel good about right now. I'm been shooting really well. The past several weeks, my release feels really good. You know what I mean? Like everything's breaking the way it should, and my arrows are landing where I want them to land. My broadhead's tuned up, no problem. Like they landed right with my field points, so I had no issues there. The only thing that still I have that thinking piece of being in the timber and still a little bit of that, am I holding low or am I holding right on? That's
Yeah.
I'd love to be able to remove that. So I might have to play around with my yardages a little bit and figure out where that 3-inch drop is at 30 yards ish, 3 to 4 inch drop is at 30 yards.
And I'll tell you, that is a great point that you bring up. I'm glad you said that. 3-inch drop at 30 is what I consider the max acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's based on what I've played with, I think that's the perfect amount of drop for 30 to be super safe.
Mm-hmm.
So basically what I would do is basically just keep moving your zero in, and it may be 26 yards, it may be 24 yards, depending on your bow and your setup.
Mm-hmm.
But basically move it in to where, you just basically take your pin, hold it on 30, adjust it until you're 3 inches low, and then just walk up until you figure out where your point on is. And regardless of whatever it is, the numerical distance doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's 27 or 22.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter. You're basically, established a max point blank range that 0 to 30, you're within that 6-inch vital corridor, or that, part that you want to hit on a deer.
Yeah.
And you're also allowing for fall. I mean, it is a foolproof system.
Yeah.
And I think that you'll see some of the older time guys, the guys that have been around a long time, that kill a lot of big deer consistently. Their bows are so simple.
Yeah.
They're just so simple. There's no moving parts. There's no fancy stuff. Most of them, I promise you, are shooting one pin.
Right.
Especially the old badass public land guys. I mean, that's just what they're doing. And as far as the rest goes, I'll make a little point for you to think about. I don't know if people know this or not, but when you see the greatest shooters in the world, shooting on these stages or at these 3D shoots, the Levi Morgans, the Dan McCarthy's, and all these great shooters, I don't know if people realize this or not, but they're not shooting drop away rests. And I think everybody's assuming that they are. They're not shooting drop away rest. They're shooting a fixed, basically lizard tongue launcher. It is a flexible tongue that holds the arrow, and it does not move and it does not fall away. There's no moving parts. It literally, they move it left or right, they twist it up or down, they torque it down, and the damn thing doesn't move. Now, most people think that they're shooting drop away rest. They're not. So my question is, when you've got the greatest shooters in the world shooting on the biggest stage for the biggest bucks, the biggest money, Okay.
Mhm.
They are eliminating a percentage of failure. They're not taking a chance that that drop away rest is not going to work.
Right.
And why wouldn't you take that same philosophy and apply it to your hunting, especially when you only get 2 or 3 opportunities a year?
Yeah.
And you're going to risk one of them to something stupid happening and not working, and your bow's quiet.
Yeah.
So you probably didn't realize that, did you? You probably thought they were all shooting drop away rest.
Yeah, I thought they were shooting drop away rest, man. But I'll tell you what, you twisted up my brain with all this right now, because I'm now thinking about it. I'm like, man, now what do I need to change on my bow now? I was like, because now I'm trying to think about what I can eliminate.
Kevin.
Yeah.
Kevin Vistison.
Yeah.
I love that guy. He is hysterical. He was having problems tuning his one of his new primes that he had last year.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd been telling him, take that drop away rest off. You're getting contact, back and forth.
Right.
Put a whisker biscuit on it. He's like, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. So he called me on his way home from the prime factory, because he lives, I guess, not far from there.
Yeah. Yeah. He lives right around the corner from there.
Yeah. And so they're like, oh, hey, yeah, man, bring your bow and we'll help you. And so he calls me and he goes, you SOB. He said, you're going to love this. He said, I got there, told them what was happening, what was going on. They're like, oh, yeah, no problem. They grab the bow, throw it up on the vise. The first thing they did was take my drop away rest on and bolt a damn whisker biscuit on it. And then they started tuning my bow. And I said, that's right, because they eliminated the chance of failure and variable from that drop away rest. They eliminated what could be erratic contact from shot to shot to shot based on spring tension or bounce back or all the other BS that goes on with these things.
Right.
They eliminated that out of the system, and they went just to the bow and what the bow can do. And he said it just makes total sense now.
Yeah.
So, and hell, man, we're not shooting at 80 yards.
Yeah, exactly. I know, because now I'm thinking, I'm like, man, I got a whisker biscuit in my basement. I was like,
yeah.
Then I should just
bolt her own, brother.
Throw it on my bow and get rid of my fancy drop away. But
well, it's no one's fault. That it's no one's fault. I mean, it is what the hunting industry has told us that we need.
Right.
It is this overcomplication of technology and over application of unneeded, unwanted, undesirable technology that these companies have told us, this is what you need to be successful. This is what you need to kill big deer. And it's just not true. Right. They've told us you need light arrows. They've told us you need expandable broadheads. They've told us that you need a drop away rest and these, 8-pin sights with floaters and all this other jazz. Yeah. What they're doing is they're selling things to create shortcuts for you to not put in the work to become a good shooter.
Yeah.
Because a drop away rest is a mask for your flaws.
Right.
Mm-hmm. That's all. No one invented the expandable broadhead to get a bigger hole. They originally, invented the expanded broadhead because people couldn't shoot their bows and get their broadheads to group.
Right. Yeah.
That's the only reason they came, was for accuracy. It wasn't for performance.
Right.
So instead of the industry investing the time and money into educating guys on how to tune their own bow, how to become better shooters, they just throw gadgets at it.
Yeah.
And the gadgets are the fastest road to failure because they're shortcuts. And anything you do in life that you're using shortcuts to achieve, it's not going to sustain. Yeah. You got to have a foundation. And that foundation is simplicity and you doing your job and becoming a good shooter.
Right. Man, you always bring the goods, man. But speaking of building a foundation, speaking of shit that works, products that work, if you wouldn't mind, tell folks where they can find out more about Day 6 and what you got going on and where they can get gear that's just going to work and no frills.
Well, it's day6gear.com, and then we're on social media, Day6Gear. We're on Instagram. We're not on anything else really, but the easiest way to get help is just pick up the phone and call our number, and I answer it. So I am the, customer service guy. I am the tech guy. I'm head custodian, everything. So I've got guys that help me and work with me, but I answer the phone and I handle, the problems or issues. And, I love helping guys figure out their setups. I love helping them dissect what their, problems could be and work through it and figure out how to get them shooting efficiently, quickly. Whether that means buying our products or not, it's not about that. For us, it's, we just want to make guys more efficient and start bringing people back to what bow hunting really is supposed to be. It was supposed to be a close range, game, in a challenge with, your quarry, your animals or whatever. It was never meant to be this long range thing that it's become.
Right.
And all of this gadgets and stuff, that's all it's done. It's just, it's to, help people do things that really bow hunting was never meant to be. So, pick up the phone, call us, and, I'll help, figure out what you need and how to get there. And I'll always be honest with you. And if our stuff's not going to work, I'll be honest with you and tell you, you got more problems than what I can fix. And here's what you need to do. That's a hard conversation for me to have.
Right.
When I start talking to a guy and I realize, number one, he's got a lot of shooting problems, or number two, his bow is jacked.
Right.
Yeah. And I can't help him over the phone.
Yeah.
It's yeah. So
yeah. Well, I can attest to your willingness to help folks. I actually had a fellow who listens to this show and had knew that I was shoot Day 6 broadheads and arrows, and he actually messaged me and said, hey, what do you think of these? I'm having some trouble with X, Y. I forget exactly what he was having trouble with. I think he may have been having some trouble, getting his bow attuned, and with the arrows he was using and broadheads, he wasn't sure if he was spinning right, I think was part of the problem. And I said, yeah, I was like, go to your website, go to Day 6 website. And I was like, and just, either contact them on the phone number there. I was like, or message them on social media. I was like, chances are you'll get Brian. And I was like, and he'll hook you up, he'll get you straightened out. And literally he texted me, or he messaged me the next day and just, to say thank you or whatever. And he was like, hey, he's like, Brian called me right back. He's like, he talked. So whenever Brian says he's literally the tech guy, the custodian guy, like he is the guy, and he will make sure you get fixed up. And that's coming from someone who listens to this show and it had an interaction with Brian and Day 6 and came by, or, came away with a great experience. So, kudos to you guys.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah, man. So kudos to the way you do things. I always love having you on. I love just talking to you when we get a chance to talk, even offline, personally or whatever. You're good people, and I'm glad you make a killer product, and I'm glad you're always here to help set us all straight, brother. I appreciate you.
Well, I got one more tech tip for you personally, and then we'll sign off here.
Okay.
If you're going to do a road trip with Zach over your shoulder.
Yeah.
He did not change his underwear for 10 days. So you might need to make sure that he brings an extra set, and you have at least a 5-day mid-trip mandate that he does a wash down and changes.
Right.
He's a big hairy animal.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for the heads up on that. I'm actually going to text him right after this and be like, hey, homie, I'm going to send you some underwear. I expect you to bring them along.
That's right.
It's awesome. All right, man. Well, hey, I appreciate you coming on, brother. I'll talk to you soon. All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening. And if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And hell, while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there too. I'd be super appreciative if you'd do those few things for me. And before I shut this thing down, I need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, Skull Brew Coffee Company, and Maven Optics. And until next time, we'll see y'all.